right. This is gonna be Kuki Hyperbloom.
The bond is strong.
Okay. Jesus. It's so high. So we maxed out Kuki Shinobu yesterday, and her damage and aggravate isn't the best overall, but her Hyperbloom damage is insane. And I just want to show this to you guys because it is so crazy. She literally went from being a sort of 0 character to a 100 character all the way up. Her damage is increased by so much while she's still able to provide decent healing for your team. So let me show you what I'm talking about. This is why Kuki Shinobu works, and this is why she's so good now. Okay, so first off, if you look over here, I don't know why I leveled her normal attack. Basically, she is an electro healer. She's the only electro healer in the game up until another electro character comes out in the future that will potentially be a healer as well. So right now, it costs 30% of her current HP to be able to cast her heal, but it heals 4.8% of her max HP plus 542 per tick, which is about 1 every 1.5 seconds. And this is at talent level 8. However, she also gets a bonus to her healing based off of her elemental mastery. As you can see right here, healing amount will be increased by 75% of elemental mastery. So what you can do is take advantage of this by just stacking full elemental mastery on her. So we stacked up Iron Sting here. We also added Gilded Dreams, elemental mastery, EM, and we could actually get this probably closer to 800 if we maxed out all of our artifacts, but probably expect to have like around 700 in a full EM Kuki setup. This is crazy. The damage that you are getting out of Kuki is like not what I expected at all. Now that being said, in this team specifically that we're using her in, Sucrose is also triggering some of them, which is leading to a lot higher damage. Also, she's sharing elemental mastery, so basically both these characters are going to be triggering Hyperbloom, and both these characters are going to be dealing a lot of damage, and that is why Kuki is so freaking good now, because she can just output so much Hyperbloom damage so very quickly. Now, the reason she doesn't work in Aggravate back when I tested in Aggravate is because of two things. One is her damage is just not that impressive, and two is that she has standard ICD. Now, standard ICD is you can apply an element once every 3 hits or once every 2.5 seconds. So basically, she's not able to consistently apply Electro enough to make the damage gain worth it. Not to mention that she's a healer, right? So you want her to be performing her best role, which is going to be a healer. She's not going to be healing very much if you build her something like HP or attack electro damage crit. And so you want to really take advantage of the EM scaling that she gets here and just build Hyperbloom. The reason she works in Hyperbloom, despite standard ICD, is because every time you bloom, you spawn a Dendro Core, and I've explained this in a lot of my other videos, but each Dendro Core can only be hit once before it activates, and when it gets hit by Electro, it does a Hyperbloom. What that means is that the ICD doesn't exist because it will only be hit once anyways, so you can constantly apply Electro to every single core that's out, and you don't have to wait for 3 hits or 2.5 seconds. You're gonna Hyperbloom every time a core is on the field, and that's what makes it so dang good. It basically erases her internal cooldown and makes her just deal a ton of damage. So with that said, I want to show you guys more Kuki Hyperbloom stuff and then talk about some teams so that way you guys can know kind of what to look for and whether or not she's worth building for your account specifically. So here we are in Spiral Abyss. We're gonna do just an all 4-star character run here. Dude, I'm so glad the Abyss switched over. It's so much more like tolerable to play. Okay, so check this out. Basically, like, Sucrose is swirling Hydro on everything while they're taking Dendro damage. That's spawning a bunch of Bloom cores. And then Kuki is able to proc them with her burst. And as you can see, they're already down to half health. These are all using 4-star free-to-play accessible weapons. As you can see, like, we're actually just shredding them, which is insane. This is something that I would have never thought possible. I remember back when there were leaks of Sumeru, everyone was saying like, oh, that's not gonna fix Kuki, like Kuki is doomed. Here we are with Kuki being fixed by Dendro improvements. So you could always just bring someone like Fischl here instead, but I just kind of want to show you guys how effective this is. So thing's almost dead, and we cleared in less than a minute and a half here. Oh, let me finish this guy off. Okay, there we go. We cleared in less than a minute and a half. And that's with Kuki Shinobu dealing like a significant portion of the damage. Obviously, Sigchel is doing a ton of the damage, but he's not the main focus of the team. You're still hitting like 30k Hyperblooms consistently while also swirling with Sucrose, which just ends up being like a ridiculous amount of damage. And I think it's really cool that we can finally make this character that not a lot of people were interested in using for higher end content into a character that's actually very good for it. Now, honestly, this team might be better for second half. The problem with second half is that the Dendro is like, the enemy has Dendro resistance. The big bird, big green bird has so much Dendro resistance that can be kind of a pain in the butt. Holy these numbers, dude, there's so many of them. There's so many of them, and you get the 30k Hyperblooms. So the one thing you have to be careful of with Shinobu in general is that her health is always low because she has to use some of her active HP in order to activate her heals, which is fine, whatever. It just means that she can't really take a hit. If you switch onto her to activate her healing and someone is attacking, she can die. Even with Singshell's damage reduction, because we're not building her full HP, you definitely need to make sure that you only switch into her when you know you can either dodge or when you can use her skill and switch off of her immediately, very quickly. So
Spring force, ring cutter. Absorption test.
Okay, I want this guy to stop running away from me. We're gonna ignore him for now.
Animal hypostasis simulation.
We're gonna just ignore him. He's going to be annoying and he's going to just throw stuff at us. He's not gonna get any closer. That guy just stands completely still, but it's not really worth chasing him down when he just dashes wherever he wants to go anyways. So do this now. Touch with Singshell. Okay. Now we get the Hyperbloom. Now we have all of the Hyperblooms happening all at once. And we're getting like 32k per Hyperbloom. I need you to stop doing that though, that's cringe. And then another thing you'll run into is you may run into energy issues on your other units. So like Dendro MC right now is having trouble getting energy back on floors like this where there's not a lot of enemies. What you can do is you can actually run Kuki on something like Fav, and that ends up being pretty solid too. So I know that I said Aggravate isn't really ideal in comparison to Hyperbloom. It's a bit of an exaggeration. Aggravate is still fine. It's just that Kuki isn't dealing a majority of the damage. It's going to be mostly Fischl. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I changed Kuki's build over to a sort of whale build. We have Jade Cutter on her now. We built a crit setup with double elemental mastery. We're doing EM, electro damage, crit damage. So we got close to 400 elemental mastery, and then we have 1500 attack. Then we just have our Fischl on 4-piece Thundering Fury. She's gonna have the stringless. And you'll see really quickly when we go into this Spiral Abyss, you'll see that Fischl's gonna be taking over the damage by a lot. Now keep in mind, what I'm doing right now is kind of peak feels crafting, right? Nothing I'm saying is 100% backed up by numbers, and it's possible the Aggravate team could be slightly better, but if you're trying to get the most value out of Kuki, if Kuki is the character you want to showcase, you're going to want to showcase her in the Hyperbloom team, because that's where she's dealing the majority of her damage. This team gets carried by a lot of Sucrose, Fischl, and DMC Aggravate. But it is nice to see the big numbers from Kuki. I love seeing that. We also gotta spawn Oz again here. That way we can get all the A4 procs, because again, if you guys didn't know, Fischl's Ascension 4 is basically going to make it so that whenever you proc a reaction, Oz will do a follow-up, what is it, Thundering Retribution. And when that happens, you deal a bunch of bonus damage because it's an Aggravate proc every time as long as you have Quick and Active. So as you can see, Kuki Aggravate is also okay. So she gets a lot of value out of Dendro. She can Aggravate now and she can Hyperbloom. Personally, I like the Hyperbloom team better. What it's gonna do is give you better healing because you're building her full elemental mastery, and you're gonna have damage reduction from Singshell, and it just is, you know, it's more satisfying to look at like the 30k procs. But that being said, Aggravate is fine. The only problem with Aggravate is that it's like 100% reliant on Fischl. You can play with other characters if you have hyper investment, obviously. But if you're just trying to get the most value out of like a Kuki team, then I would recommend Fischl the most, which sort of makes this spot less flexible. You can't switch it for Yelan or Singshell or anything. Putting Beto here doesn't work because you need a lot of battery for her. And then meanwhile, like you could switch out Sucrose for Hazo, Venti, or whoever you want to switch for. But in general, you just have less flexibility. I will say an Aggravate team, though, it does open up the ability to use Kale here. And so if you are a big Kale fan, if you want to play Kale, She actually has less energy requirements than Traveler. She can use Elegy, which can buff you a whole bunch, and she can be just super useful for this team. So that's something to think about if you want to play an Aggravate team. But overall, still recommend Hyperbloom for her if you want to get the most out of her, because you get so much more healing out of her too when you do it that way. You're gonna get like maybe almost 2k healing per tick on this Aggravate team, where you don't have her full EM, and you also don't have the damage reduction. Whereas on the Hyperbloom team, you know, you have someone like Singchul to be able to give you that sort of damage reduction, and also you're going to be building her full Element of Mastery, so you get more heals in general, and her value becomes a lot higher, in my opinion. But anyways, I hope that you guys are excited about Kuki being like actually pretty dang good now. I was super excited when we got her to 90 and found out like how good she felt to play and like how good she was. A lot of people were saying like, oh yeah, she's gonna be Cope back when Sumeru leaks were coming around, and dude, she's so much better than I thought she was gonna be. So anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, you know the drill. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below if you're playing Kuki Shinobu. Oh, also check out the Twitch. Should be like right there or something. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.